Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. In our first story, you'll learn how to get back at your former boss and employees who treated you badly. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Bullied by boss and coworkers. I was working for this company that offered rebates if you upgraded your house insulation and appliances, the whole Go Greener thing. I was working a year or so. I did my best to get to know everyone. I tried to join the company weekly football group. After winning the poll a few times, my picks mistakenly left out. At the Christmas party, my invitation was lost in the mail, but found out anyway. My name was drawn for a prize, an iPad. I was pretty stoked, then was told I won by mistake. After a while, my boss kept telling me that my performance wasn't meeting the requirements for my position. I busted my butt, stayed later, came in early, watched my work closely. It wasn't enough. Every day was getting worse. I was being talked about, given assignments that no one could finish. It was passive-aggressive bullying at its finest. I started having panic attacks on my way to work. I was having nightmares and slowly having a breakdown. My husband kept telling me to quit, but we wouldn't have insurance for our family. I held on. Still, no matter how I improved or how hard I worked, I was being told I wasn't meeting the requirements. I started being yelled at in front of others, ridiculed relentlessly. I'm a proud person, but even I have a breaking point. I'd run to the bathroom and just cry, just to leave and start the torment all over again the next day. We had a meeting and they were reorganizing people into new positions, and my name was mentioned as one of the few that were moving to a higher position. After the shock, I sent my boss an email letting him know how excited I was and that he wouldn't be disappointed. Later that day, after I got back from lunch, he asked me into his office. He had HR on the phone. For the next 15 minutes, I was told how horrible my work was, how my personality wasn't a good fit, yada yada yada. When I tried to stand up for myself, I was shot down. My boss talked over me, and before I knew it, he was holding a box with my things. I was beside myself. I went home and slept for days. I eventually pulled myself together and moved on. Although it was a really bad experience, I decided to go back to school and got my degree in visual art. I never saw myself as an artist. I had my first art show, and to my surprise, it was going really well. One piece went for almost $1,000. The buyer wanted to meet me. I instantly knew him when I saw him. It was my old boss. He congratulated and told me how my piece moved him and blah, blah, blah. He was so sincere, and his wife was also praising me. With my husband standing next to me, I let my former boss know that he wasn't allowed to purchase the piece. He then asked about another, and then another, and I said no to all of them. He's obviously frustrated. I told him, no, those are for sale, but you personally are not allowed to own any of my art. I do not want anything I create to be anywhere near the likes of you. I then reminded him how horrible he treated me and the mental anguish he caused. His wife was livid with him. As he tried to keep his composure, I walked away while he was still talking me into selling him a piece. I was shaking and couldn't believe I just did that. I really could have used the money, but I think I made the right decision. I would have charged him $50,000 and an iPad. And our next story. A customer makes a waitress cry, proceeds to make giant restaurant manager angry. For context, my brother is huge, like freakishly huge. He's a GD marvel of nature and a sight to behold if you don't expect to see him. He's just slightly over 7 feet tall, almost 7'2". That's 218 centimeters when he's in boots, which he's always in because why not, right? At the time, he weighed somewhere between 300 and 330 pounds, 135 to 149 kilograms. In between terrorizing villages and kidnapping princesses, he was also going to culinary school full-time and working full-time as a sous chef at insert name of corporate chain restaurant here. Since he generally knows what he's doing and doesn't have an attitude, he got promoted up the ladder pretty quickly and was viewed by the staff and management as an unofficial manager. He was there for about a year before getting me a job as a busboy a few nights of the week for extra cash. Now, my brother is the sweetest man you will ever meet, but because of his sheer size, he's gotten a bit of a reputation as someone you don't want to mess with. One night during the summer, it wasn't too busy, all things considered, until a large party of nearly 20 or so show up and decided to make life hard for the staff. They all order a variety of steak, but no matter what was given to them, there was always something wrong with the dish. I asked for my steak rare, but this is far too rare. My meal was supposed to come with a baked potato and cheese on the side, not on the potato. I want a completely new dish, etc. And while the adults were terrorizing the staff, their kids were terrorizing the customers, running around and screaming their heads off while climbing over chairs and empty tables when the other busboys and I are trying to clean them up. They talked down to us and treated us like we had learning disabilities when we had trouble dealing with their insane demands. They were loud, obnoxious, and berating the young waitress assigned to them. The group was so big, 3 waitresses were assigned to the table, but one in particular, a sweet, tiny 19-year-old girl of Japanese descent, got the worst of it for daring to stop a child from playing so close to the kitchen. W is waitress, BD is bully dad, BK is bully's kid. W: Sweetie, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to go back to your table. BK: But why? I want to play. W: You can't be so close to the kitchen, sweetie. Someone might step on you. BK goes back to the table to speak to BD. He stands in a huff and barrels down towards the waitress. BD: Excuse me, what did you say to my son? I told him he couldn't play so close to the kitchen. He could get hurt. Who do you think you are speaking to my child like that? I want to speak to your manager. Clearly, this job is too hard for you. You tell her, Dad. I'm sorry, sir, but I'm sorry you're deaf and dumb, or are your ears as slanted as your eyes? At that point, the sweet waitress walked off with tears already in her eyes. Edie goes back to his table with a smirk. Little does he know what's about to happen. Waitress is in the back prep area crying her eyes out with several other employees trying to comfort her. My big brother sees this and asks what happened. Now, part of the reputation he has is that he's extremely protective of the female employees, especially the younger girls, and seeing how the restaurant isn't too busy, he decides to speak to the customer who wanted to see the manager. After having the guy pointed out by the still upset waitress, he walked to the loud table. One by one, each adult stops talking as they watch an angry giant get closer and closer to them. By the time he's standing at their table, he looks like a GD parent staring down the kiddie table. BB: You wanted to speak to a manager? BD: What? You told your waitress you wanted to speak to a manager. I'm the manager on staff. What can I help you with? Well, no, we've been getting a lot of food sent back from this table. Is there an issue you want me to fix for you? No, the food is good. Everything's fine. BB then proceeds to go to every person asking how their food was and if there was a problem he could help with. Not a single person says anything negative. All of them far too terrified by the shack-sized human being staring them down until he gets back to Bully. He stares at him unblinking, just watching him squirm in his seat. Aren't you the guy that made my 19-year-old waitress cry? The man stammers, clearly intimidated by my brother's resting bee face. The BD says nothing as every adult and child at that table silently watches the man get browbeaten by my brother. He doesn't yell, he doesn't curse, he just stares at them, almost begging for them to say anything. They don't. My brother then proceeds to stand there, watching the group continue their meal in almost absolute silence for almost half an hour. He gets their check himself and watches as they pay, making sure none of them try anything stupid like not paying for their dinners, and escorts them out of the restaurant. We never see any of those people again. And our last story. Change the schedule midweek and hold me responsible? I spent 4 years working weekends at a large deli chain restaurant. I worked FOH since day one and was the most experienced server and cashier that worked there. In my last year, we got a new district manager, had 3 different GMs, and had about a 2-month turnover for the new hourly employees. The newest GM was awful. Our branch was in a mall and was busy constantly, but she forced us to stick to the other branches' staffing maximums, like 1 cashier from 5 to 11 a.m. and 2 to 4 p.m., and said that since we should be ready to close 15 minutes after the restaurant did, employees who worked within 5 hours of close did not need a break. She was also bitchy, rude to the staff, and made it clear that as the GM of the deli, she was so much better than us low-life servers. I was close to my breaking point, but decided to stick it out since I knew they'd be screwed without me. Under her management, seasoned employees were leaving almost as quickly as new ones. One Saturday morning, after staying out until 3 a.m., I was awakened by a phone call at 4:30 in the GD morning from my GM demanding to know where I was. I told her I worked at noon, and she said I was supposed to be there to open at 4, and threatened to fire me if I didn't show up in 15. I called her bluff and said I'd be in at 7. At 7, I walked in and was met by an angry GM and the apologetic shift lead. The GM grabbed me by the shoulder and marched me to the back, spun me around, and shoved me almost face first into the schedule. She pointed to my name, and sure enough, I was scheduled for 4 a.m. as the only cashier until lunch. Confused and seeing red, I pulled out my phone with the picture of the schedule I'd taken the previous Sunday, which showed me as scheduled from 12 to 8. She looked at the picture and rolled her eyes, then said, "Well, duh, I changed the schedule on Tuesday." I reminded her I only worked weekends, and she told me that it was my responsibility to know the schedule, which was only available from the printout in the BOH, and gave me my first ever write-up for being lazy, irresponsible, and unreliable. 2 days later, I handed in 4 weeks' notice, apologized to my gloating GM for my behavior on Saturday, and promised to be on time for the rest of my shifts. So every weekday from 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. for the next 4 weeks, I called the restaurant's customer line every 2 hours, asking about the schedule. Every 2 hours, I held up the phone, made someone stop ringing/running orders to answer it, and had them leave the FOH to go look at the schedule. Every time the GM told me to stop, I told her I was just too afraid of being late to risk it. The day before my last scheduled day, I called the restaurant and asked for the GM. She angrily told me that, just like the schedule said, I worked at 4 a.m. The next morning, and as the only cashier in the busy restaurant until lunch, which was her decision to schedule, I had better be there, or else. I apologized and told her that I wasn't actually calling about the schedule, but to call in sick. I hope she had fun opening as the cashier the next day. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.